With no space at home, many people store their junk, and sometimes hidden treasures, in storage units. When payments stop, these units go to auction, and no one knows what's inside. One man placed a final bid on a mysterious unit, hoping for something valuable. He never imagined that just hours later, the police would show up at his door. Buried beneath the dust and clutter, he found a sealed safe. Could it be cash, jewels, or something far more dangerous? What he uncovered didn't just surprise him, it pulled him into a chilling mystery. Stay tuned. This story only gets wilder. But before we start our story, smash the like button, make sure to subscribe, and hit the notifications bell so you won't miss any new stories. He made the decision to call it a day if he didn't uncover anything significant in the following auctioned container. Joe and about 20 other people gathered outside this container. Everyone was interested in seeing inside this 5x15 apartment. They could hold the belongings of any one-bedroom apartment, therefore they were too huge to actually see anything. The auctions didn't take place amid shouting, drama, and screaming like you see on television. Even so, it was entertaining, particularly when Joe engaged in a bidding conflict with a potential bidder. He liked to win, but he had to be careful because he had a budget to follow. Joe was now powerless to stop. There was plenty of furnishings in this container, which was often a positive indicator. If it was old, he might charge a premium amount for it. In addition, there were some further things he wished to view. Yet one woman kept raising the prices. Only $100 was the starting point, which was excessively exorbitant. He soon discovered, though, that the jar was almost full. He thus matched the wager, but the woman increased it slightly more. As it went on, he was left wondering how much he ought to spend. He was determined and was now offering $350. He was unable to part with that container, but the price kept rising until $500 was offered as the winning bid. When Joe realized he may have spent too much, he understood he had won and began to shake. After they lost the bid, the majority of the spectators left the area. A few people, though, urged Joe to enter and begin going through the items. He wished he hadn't been the one who had to deal with it after he saw what was inside. Joe entered the room slowly, excited and nervous about what he may discover. Old furniture filled the container, which let him feel a little better. He could move around and see everything because there was a tiny space between everything. Joe now noticed that the furniture wouldn't cover the cost he had to pay for this unit, and he began to perspire. Despite the fact that they were great pieces, he needed better to break even. He immediately began looking in vain. Joe looked around the space before settling on the drab gray container next to the floor-level chest of drawers. He went straight to it and tried to open it. It was, however, locked. He requested a drill from a friend and hoped for the best. Joe carefully lifted the lid after carefully prying the lock out with a deep drill. To go more, he uncovered a group of VHS tapes and pulled them out. He noticed a message underneath the cassettes, which sent chills through his body. Overall, the handwriting was sloppy, and Joe checked over the videotapes separately. The sole word on the note was, "Don't." There was no more information on the labels provided, although some had dates on them. Have you ever had the sense that someone is watching you? Joe experienced it as a gradual crawl. He even thought someone was staring at him. He turned to look behind him, but there was nothing there. It was just Joe. It wasn't going to be simple for Joe and his incredible discovery. The container was surrounded by policemen. He heard a knock on his door about 2 hours after the finding. What was he currently engaged in, and what did he discover? Joe opened a bundle of sticky paper that was stored in the safe to discover $50 bills. He noticed increasing amounts of money as he continued. Who was the rightful owner, and how did it get there? Why did the authorities care about this? Joe finally understood what he had done. Then he posted the safe's contents to his social media accounts. He texted pictures of the safe to his girlfriend because he was so eager to see it. The police arrived for that reason. Even though he hadn't counted every penny, he was confident he could get by with it. He had $1 million available. He eventually went to talk to a policeman, but he quickly discovered that the police weren't the only ones curious about what was in the safe. Safes totaling roughly $7.5 million might be found scattered throughout the storage container. The problem, though, was that after learning of the discovery, the owner attempted to recover his riches by employing attorneys. Joseph was aware of his predicament. Joe was terrified when he started receiving threats after discovering the money. He was filled with questions as it turned into a nightmare. Why hadn't they gathered the money and who had hidden it there? He was also concerned about the VHS cassettes. The moment the police arrived, things picked up speed. Joe got a call from the lawyers for the original owner not long after that was resolved. They claimed he had to repay the entire sum of money, with the exception of the $600,000 finder's fee. He had to consider what he ought to do next, but he didn't want to deal with the original owner of the safe. Even though he felt better at the thought of getting paid for his trouble, he understood that the attorneys were only intimidating him. Joe was instructed not to open the container until the case was resolved. He had to figure out what was on the VHS cassettes, though. He thus unzipped one of the bags, inserted it into the VCR, and hit the play button. He claimed to have seen something terrible, and after watching the tapes, he was unable to forget what he had seen. He even experienced nightmares. He made an effort to convince himself that they were phony, but he wasn't certain. Joe was facing a difficult situation. Although it was a chance, it might not happen. He might be pursued if the safe's owner learns that he watched the tapes. Perhaps he ought to keep quiet about it. Perhaps the vault's original owner was aware that he had watched the VHS recordings. What could possibly be on them? He had occasionally felt as though someone was watching him. The restless evenings made the images repeat over and over in his head. Joe resisted sharing what he had seen on the videos, despite the fact that his curiosity had overcome him. All that is currently known about him is his fear for his life. Was dealing with these folks worth the money? Did they realize that the safe contained the tapes? He found out via acquaintances that after a storage container was sold, the contents were no longer the tenant's property. As a result, he was entitled to keep everything inside because he bought it legitimately. The attorneys, though, stood their ground. The lawyers increased the finder's fee to over $1 million in the belief that they were aiding Joe. The entire time, these men were aggressive. They could do just about anything, in fact. How would he react? Joe began to wonder how someone could have overlooked leaving $7.5 million in a storage facility. On something like that, you don't become delinquent. Even though it was obvious that the owner wasn't a good person, he was concerned that his situation would only become worse. Did he receive $1.2 million? And he didn't enjoy being used as a punching bag. It's a sizable sum of money, but it's not the sizable sum he'd been holding while unpacking. His mind was disorganized, and he was unsure of what to do. Following numerous threats of death and second thoughts, Joe decided to divide the funds equally. The storage container's previous owners hadn't used or paid for it in over a year, which led to it being auctioned off. In the self-storage business, like real estate, you pay to store your belongings, and if you miss payments, the facility has the right to sell off the contents to recover losses. While this may seem unfair, many storage facilities operate on slim margins. Auctions are often a last resort, not for profit, but to clear space for paying customers. Most unpaid units don't yield much revenue, but removing delinquent tenants is necessary to maintain the business. Buying a storage unit without knowing what's inside is always a gamble. Some hope to uncover valuables, hidden cash, antiques, or collectibles. That's what made Joe's find so shocking. He discovered cash safes in the unit. Though the experience rattled him, the thrill of it all would likely keep him returning to auctions. It was a win, even if not everything inside was valuable. Which brings us to another incredible discovery, one involving a young collector and a modest painting he believed might be worth more than it seemed. The young man, an antique enthusiast, brought the painting to an antiques roadshow event. He had a gut feeling it could fetch a good price. When appraiser David Weiss examined the portrait, both of them were in for a surprise. David Weiss was a renowned expert in European art, with over 3 decades of experience in auction houses and art evaluation. As the senior vice president at Freeman's Auction House, he was also a recurring expert on the American version of Antiques Roadshow. His area of expertise included 19th and 20th century European paintings and sculptures, and his work extended into academia, teaching business courses at Drexel University. For Weiss, the most rewarding moments in his profession were unexpected discoveries, artifacts brought in by unsuspecting private collectors that turned out to be immensely valuable. This painting, brought in by a boy from Richmond, Virginia, would soon become one of those finds. The boy had purchased the artwork for just $2. Many collectors and appraisers know that valuable pieces often surface in unlikely places: thrift stores, estate sales, or even dusty corners of antique shops. The boy hoped the painting had more to it than met the eye. As with every guest on the show, David Weiss asked the young man what he knew about the piece. Though composed, the boy didn't expect much from the evaluation, certainly not a life-changing figure. But that's exactly what made this story remarkable. David Weiss, with practiced care, examined the painting, noting its style, brushwork, and materials. He had no doubt the artwork had true value. In moments like these, appraisers rely not only on expertise, but also on an understanding of art history, market demand, and provenance. As Weiss explained during interviews, his passion lay in uncovering such hidden gems, objects that collectors never knew were valuable until a professional revealed their significance. The appraisal confirmed what the boy had only hoped for. The painting was indeed worth a considerable amount. It was a validation of his eye for antiques, and a thrilling experience that would likely stay with him for life. In the world of storage auctions and art appraisals, stories like Joe's and the young collectors showed the thrill of discovery, of turning forgotten or overlooked items into something extraordinary.